is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. So this is my Aya Neo Air. I did a review on this device a while back and haven't really touched it since because I couldn't get past the poor battery life that this device actually has. Which is a shame because I really like this OLED screen and the portability that this device brings. Enter ChimeraOS, a Linux-based SteamOS type operating system that is a little bit more optimized to handle the Aya Neo Air's battery issues, but also programmed to work with the Aya Neo Air's unique button structure. Plus, you get the versatility of using SteamOS as well as a desktop mode that will allow you to install EmuDeck as well as other emulator solutions. So in this video, we're going to do a tutorial on how to install ChimeraOS onto your Aya Neo device. And we're also going to go in depth into what this operating system brings to see if this is a good fit for you and your Windows-based handheld. What features are you getting and what features are you sacrificing? I'm really looking forward to seeing what ChimeraOS has to offer, so let's dive in and let's get to work. Alright, before we go ahead and wipe the operating system, let's take a quick look at what having Windows on an Aya Neo device gets you. And let's start with this fingerprint sensor at the top, which just allows you to log in quickly while still giving us an extra layer of security. And then we also have the Aya Space software, which in my review I said was a little bit buggy, but this will allow you to adjust your fan speed, change your TDP on the fly, as well as change your resolution and add some apps and shortcuts right to the front page for easy access. Now, the game assistant within the Aya Space software will also allow you to make some customizations, like changing the face buttons, as well as programming the gyro and the vibration motor. And it even lets you fine-tune the shortcut buttons as well as the RGB lighting effect that is underneath the left and right joysticks. So you could do a solid color, you could do a breathing effect, you can have it be multicolored, and the Aya Space software, buggy as it is, does allow for a large degree of customization within the device itself. Now, even though you are running Windows, you can run Steam Big Picture mode, which has been updated to provide an experience very close to the Steam Deck. So you can run your games from this interface, but you are going to have some small issues because you don't have any extra Xbox buttons or shortcuts to get to the Steam menu. You have to use the touchscreen. And so while you do get a nice front end, you don't really have an efficient way to adjust things in your games, like control schemes and all that. And so now that we've done that review, we can go ahead and install ChimeraOS and see if there are any improvements or if there are any sacrifices. So the first thing we want to do is we want to get our Windows 11 product key, just in case we decide to go back and reinstall Windows after we've wiped the hard drive and put ChimeraOS in. And we can find that in the registry editor. So we could just go ahead to search and start typing registry and the editor will come up. And from there, we'll simply navigate to where the product key is kept. So we're going to go into HKey local machine and then go ahead and click the drop down on the left. And then we're going to go to software. Let's hit the drop down again and then let's go ahead and go to Microsoft. And then we're going to hit that drop down yet again. From there, we're going to do a long scroll all the way down to the Windows NT folder. And then once we get there, we're going to hit the drop-down menu next to Windows NT. And there's only going to be one folder there, and it's going to be current version. So just select that folder and hit the drop-down again to get to another folder called Software Protection Platform. And if we click back up product key default, we're going to get our product key, and then you could go ahead and save that somewhere or write it down. And then we're going to go ahead and shut off the Aya Neo device. And then we're going to move to another PC in order to set up our USB drive. Now, if you don't have another PC, you can actually do this step on the Aya Neo. Before we go any further, let's just check our SD card slot and make sure that we take any SD cards out. For this next step, you're going to need a USB-C to USB-A adapter, which comes with your Aya Neo device. You're also going to need a USB drive. You need at least 32 gigabytes. I'm using a 256 Samsung Nano drive. Now, it's not pictured here, but you're also going to need a USB keyboard. So I would actually plug in your Aya Neo device and just make sure it has enough charge, because you may not be able to charge your device and plug the keyboard in for this next step. And the last thing you're going to want is for your battery to die in the middle of installation. So either on a Windows PC or on the Aya Neo device itself running Windows, we're going to navigate to the ChimeraOS website. And there's a lot of useful information here as far as what the operating system does, a list of features, supported games, as well as a link to their wiki guide with facts and getting started and all kinds of useful information that you might find useful prior to installation. So this is worth a look before installing, but when you're ready, we're going to go ahead to the ChimeraOS homepage and we're going to download the operating system. Take a quick look at the system requirements here. I do believe that most, if not all, Aya Neo devices do meet these requirements. And you're also going to find installation instructions on this page as well. So click download. And once we have this file, it's going to be time to fire up Balena Etcher. And we're going to plug in that USB drive that I showed you earlier. And we're going to use Etcher to take this ChimeraOS ISO and burn it onto the USB drive to make it an install drive. It's a fairly straightforward process. You pick the ChimeraOS ISO, you pick the Samsung drive. You may get this warning that you're erasing an unusually large drive. Just make sure that it's the USB drive and not something on your actual hard drive. And then just go ahead and let the program create the installation media. Once it's done, let's go ahead and eject it from our computer, and this is where things get interesting. Now we're going to connect the USB drive with the USB-C adapter, and we're also going to connect our USB keyboard with a USB-C to USB-C adapter as well. I'm using a Newfie keyboard, but there are plenty of other keyboards out there that you can use for this. And we're going to hold the power button and the LC button, which is the extra button next to the left bumper on the Aya Neo device, and things are going to get sideways now, but we're going to go ahead and boot from the flash drive. And this is why we're going to need the keyboard, because we need the keyboard in order to do this. We're not going to have touchscreen or button functions during this process. And then things will be pretty automatic from there. You're going to see the system run through a whole bunch of scripts, and you are going to get to a point in the installation process where you are going to have to select a couple of prompts, such as which drive to install ChimeraOS 2, as well as connecting to a Wi-Fi network, because the install process will download the latest version of ChimeraOS if you don't already have it. And that's just a fairly simple process. You just use the arrow buttons on the keyboard, you use enter, and then if you need to put a password in, you use the keyboard for that as well. Here's the screen where you're going to choose where to install ChimeraOS 2. I'm going to go ahead and select NVMe SSD. That's the main hard drive of the unit, and it is going to give you the warning that it is going to be formatted. So just make sure you're okay with deleting the Windows install before you proceed in this way. And then this process is going to take some time, so go ahead and take a break, go to the bathroom, grab a coffee or your beverage of choice, and then we'll come back when everything is downloaded and installed. Alright, now that we're back, we're going to go ahead and hit enter on the keyboard to restart the computer, and it's going to bring us to the ChimeraOS start screen. And here we are in the SteamOS interface. Of course, the tutorial is going to show that the OS thinks that this is a Steam Deck, but once we get in, all the Ioneo buttons work for the quick settings as well as the Steam menu, and we can navigate this just as easily as we would the Steam Deck. Now this OS is not without its bugs. For example, here on the Ioneo Air, due to the fact that it's a different resolution from the Steam Deck, the performance overlay is actually right in the middle of the screen, and it's a little bit jarring to play games with the overlay plop right in the middle of the action. Fortunately, I think that's a unique problem to the Ioneo Air, and that will be solved in a future update. I tested the unstable build of ChimeraOS 42, and that issue is fixed in that build. Now, if I go back to my Windows desktop and go to ChimeraOS.local, if I'm connected to the same network as the Ioneo, on the Ioneo itself, a screen will pop up with a unique password, and if I put that password in, I'm taken to this screen where I can actually add games from various platforms, from emulation up to the Epic Game Store as well as GOG. And while this is really neat for adding PC games, for emulation it's not the greatest and probably not as good as using EmuDeck. For example, let's go ahead and try to add a Game Boy game here. I'm going to add Castlevania, so we're going to browse for that file, and then we're going to type Castlevania the Adventure into the name, so that way we can get our banner and our box art. And then from there, it's just a matter of picking our logos and our backgrounds, similarly to Steam ROM Manager, and then clicking Add. And then once we do that, the ROM will be playable on the Ioneo under ChimeraOS. However, I did find some issues with using Chimera's built-in emulation solution. For one, I was not able to actually get into the RetroArch menu. I tried many different combinations of button combos typically associated with RetroArch, and none of them worked. And I'm wondering if this is because I didn't install the Steam version of RetroArch. This system might assume you have RetroArch installed and then run off of that, but it downloaded a version of RetroArch, so I'm not sure what happened there. And I also noticed that I wasn't able to use an external controller. I was only able to use the Ioneo's own controls. And I also couldn't find a way to batch add multiple ROMs at once, so I found that experience to just be kind of clunky, and even though ChimeraOS's wiki says EmuDeck isn't officially supported on ChimeraOS, they do give instructions on how to do it, so I just went ahead and followed those instructions. The only difference is that because I have a device with a smaller screen, I use the Anbernic Win 600 as my model instead of the Steam Deck. However, if you have the Aya 2 or the Aya Geek, you're going to want to select Steam Deck when you are configuring EmuDeck here. And the process of installing EmuDeck is the same as on the Steam Deck, which I covered in a past video, and Retro Gamecore just released an updated video for EmuDeck's latest 2.1 update. So if you're not sure how to install EmuDeck, I'll leave links to those videos in the description of this video. And in my experience, I did not find any issues running EmuDeck on ChimeraOS on an Aya device. Everything seemed to work just as smoothly as it did on the Steam Deck. Now, I did have a walkthrough planned on installing a Decky Loader plugin to be able to control the TDP on the Aya devices. However, I found that it did not work at all for the Aya Air. However, I did hear reports from other people in the community, specifically Overkill Gaming. I had a small conversation with him on Reddit, and he said that this works just fine on the Aya 2 and the Aya Geek. So I'll leave a link in the video description to his video on how to install this plugin. Because it didn't work for me on the Aya Air, I ended up going with another program called Simple Ryzen TDP. And at least for the time being, this solution seemed to work. It was just a little bit clunkier because I had to add it as a non-Steam game and then leave it open in the background while I was booting up my other games on SteamOS. And so I'll leave a link in the video description if you're interested in installing this. But if you do, I suggest you only use it as a temporary solution until something better comes along. Now, as far as game testing goes, pretty much anything that ran on the Aya Air under Windows still runs great under ChimeraOS as well. And while the overall interface of the operating system definitely seemed better, as well as the Windows compatibility with the Proton layer, I did find that battery life was about comparable to the Windows install. And in my in-depth review of the Aya Air, I did some battery testing with both emulation as well as PC gaming, and those same battery results will hold true under ChimeraOS as well. So a game like Final Fantasy XIV will net you about 2 to 2.5 hours on the Aya Air, whereas Ori and the Will of the Wisps at the same TDP will probably run you about 2 hours as well on low settings, with the ability to cap the FPS at 30 or 60 frames per second as necessary. Now keep in mind, this is for the Aya Air, so if you have the Aya Air Pro, the Aya 2, or the Aya Geek, your battery life will be significantly more improved than the results that I got here. And that's due to the better chipsets as well as the bigger battery in those devices. However, if you're tuning in to see if ChimeraOS will drastically improve your battery life, I would have to say no, it probably won't drastically improve it, but it may slightly improve your battery life because this OS has less overhead than Windows. But then you have a game like Terraria that you can dump down to a 5-watt TDP, and you can get pretty decent and long-lasting battery from a low-powered game such as this. And I've come to discover recently just how fun Terraria can be by playing it for the Steam Machine podcast. I guest starred on that podcast recently, and we had a blast playing this game together. So shout out to Dalton, Nate, and Willie for letting me co-star with them. But I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes and I'm going to showcase a couple of emulation playtests just so you can see how emulation works on the Neo devices with ChimeraOS. And so, based on my unique experiences running ChimeraOS on an Neo device, I'm going to go over what I felt works well and what I felt still needs work with this operating system. For starters, I think it's great that they did put native button support because I really didn't like running Windows the fact that I couldn't program these buttons the way I wanted to when running Steam Big Picture mode, and this kind of fixes that. It lets the Neo button be the Steam button, and the smaller button next to it can be the quick settings, and that's how it works on the Steam Deck, so it's great to see that it works that way here. I did find that the operating system is a lot less bulky with less overhead and less to worry about, and that's something I'm not a fan of with Windows. You have to have an antivirus, you have to worry about Windows Update, and all those little issues that go with running Windows are just gone with ChimeraOS, and you can get to the games. EmuDeck does work, even though it's unofficially supported. It still worked very well for setting up and putting games on my menu and jumping right into them. And ChimeraOS does support other stores like Epic and GOG, and the desktop mode is good. It is passable, and it does do a good job when you do need to get into the desktop to set some stuff up. And the desktop edition is fairly new. It just came out in a recent update, so before that, it was a lot harder to do things like install EmuDeck on ChimeraOS, so I'm grateful that that feature is now there. Now, earlier in the video, I showed you some of the things you could do on the Windows side using the iSpace app, and unfortunately, not all of those options carry over to the ChimeraOS side. Yes, you can adjust TDP, but as far as I know, there is no way to adjust the LED lights or the fan speed. And so if you're not okay sacrificing those features, then ChimeraOS might not be for you. As far as TDP controls, you have to either install a plugin or install something like Ryzen TDP, and there is no native option, but the ChimeraOS people are working on that. And unfortunately, not all of the Decky plugins work. Some of them just give errors or just don't work properly. And if you want to use emulation, it was nice of ChimeraOS to include native support, but it doesn't work as good as EmuDeck. And then you have other little things like the performance overlay issues that I found on the Aya Neo Air that is going to be fixed in future updates, but for now it remains an issue. And so ultimately it's hard for me to give an opinion one way or another as to whether you should install ChimeraOS on your Aya Neo device of choice. If you have a newer device, you're probably going to have better luck with it, but there may be situations in which it might be better just to stick with Windows. And so ultimately, it depends on what you want to get out of your device. Are you looking for the convenience of Windows as well as all of the functions of your Aya Neo device? Or are you looking for a more simple interface with less overhead that will help you just jump right into your games? And ChimeraOS is very actively in development and new updates are coming out over time. So as ChimeraOS matures, it might become more enticing for you to want to install it. But let me know what you think in the comments below. What Aya Neo device do you have? Did you put ChimeraOS on it? And what are your thoughts? Are the benefits worth the sacrifices? But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and feel free to continue the conversation in the Retro Handhelds and Steam Machine Discord. Links will be in the video descriptions, and that's where I typically hang out in between recordings. And if this video was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.